verbal communication with people. Like I feel like I'm a bit more willing to uh, utilize inflections and such in
Right.
speech. However, I think we kind of have a somewhat similar communication style. Although I think part of that is I can get confused because I think I'll start adapting to how somebody else talks. Not necessarily that I'll end up sounding like them. That could be part of it. Like I think in this situation, I'm more sounding like you in some ways when I'm speaking, but I think sometimes too, if somebody brings a particular energy or whatnot, I'll take on a different tone. Like if they have a much more like erratic tone, they're they're just expressing all this different stuff and they're just like super excited and things like that. I might have more of a contained like. So what do you think about that? Sort of response, like more sort of just like asking questions or things like that, and providing an anchor that they can dance around. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like I've tapped into that ability to just talk. I've tapped into
Okay.
that, but I get fucking annoyed because so it's like type 8, type 9, type 1. It's all in the doing triad. And my problem is that like I think out of habit I'll just start talking to people because I'm trying to get some sort of need met, but I decide in my head, okay, I need to converse with people to try to accomplish this. And the more I talk, the more abstract, because it's like using words and like context, as I said, things like that. It's more of an abstract thing, which gets me more in my head, more out of my body. And half the time when I'm pissed about something, I won't immediately know what it is, but I know that there's something I want to do. So the more that I talk, as I said, the more abstract, which means the less I'm connected to what it is that I want to do, or I'm less connected to emotion. Um, so I'll find myself like, talking and expending many, many words, and I'll just notice internally myself getting increasingly more pissed with myself to where I'll be like into a 5-minute rant, and internally I'll be like, "Shut the fuck up!"
That's interesting. Yeah. I don't tend. Yeah. I just like the getting more abstract thing. I know that I do that. I had another thought that made me think of a contrast between 8 and 9, but I don't remember what it was.
Whoops, sorry about that.
It's okay. Like, it must not have been that important, or I just would have said it.
uh, I kind of like that because I get worried sometimes. I'm like, oh no, I've been talking a lot. I really should have made room for other people. It's one of the reasons why I like people who give off more of an 8 energy. Um, is because there's less of a concern of like, oh no, I don't want to be causing problems for them or like stepping on their toes or something like that. Because if I do, they'll probably just tell me.
Yeah, there seems to be maybe less subtext.
Right.
I enjoy that as well.
And I try to
And I've
bring
noticed
things.
the phenomenon too, like with people, like they actually do tend to get pretty comfortable,
Yeah.
and then they're more straight up, which is kind of what eight's like anyway. So it's a nice
Right.
cycle.
Yeah. I think there's this need for nines to bring things up to the surface. Anyway, like I was talking to my dad the other day, and that was one of those days that I was ranting and getting pissed at myself. I was just talking to him and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking about all this different shit, and I knew in my head as I was saying the words, like I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Not so much like I didn't know what the information meant. It was like I didn't get the point. it's like I'm utilizing this thing that's supposed to be context driven, and yet I don't understand the context of why I'm talking. Like I don't. It's sort of strange if you don't experience it. But no, basically I was talking to him, and then I realized what the point was. Like I had lost the point until I was talking, and I said something that caused me to feel something. It caused me to feel anger for a moment. And then I was able to be like, aha, there you are, you little bastard. It's like sort of how I have to be with anger. Because it's like I just started throwing out different abstract ideas until I landed on one, or I more like happened across one that allowed me to tap into anger a bit more, and then I was able to use that, and I felt more focused. Yeah. So that's I think that's sort of interesting. Because it's like
Yeah,
I feel like
I can emphasize with the like talking or ranting or whatever, and not really. You're like clearly I have something going on here, and then usually later I realize I'm angry at this thing, aren't I? I won't always be what I'm ranting about.
yeah.
I actually have a hard time sometimes really noticing when I'm angry because I think there tends to be a lot of like low level, just kind of anger. I think when I kind of forget it's there.
Yeah.
And then it kind of builds slow, and you're like, it's spoiling the frog, and you're like, oh, you're like,
I like to think of it like the body triad 891. It's kind of like that quote from the Avengers. It's like it's like, hey Doc, it's time for you to get angry. It's like that's the thing. I'm always angry, and he just turns into the Hulk.
Yeah, well, I thought of that like once I started kind of exploring my idea of the 8, especially when people were talking about that like explosiveness, and I'm like, I don't think 8s actually seem to be a little more calm for the type that literally their like flag is anger. It's like their
Yeah.
claim to fame is anger, and then everybody's like, but how come they're so calm?
They are calm to other types when an 8's like, hey, could you stop being a douchebag? Then other people are like, look how angry he is. Only a pissed person would say something so just like people freaking out because they're not used to. So yeah, it's like what the 8 calls a handshake, other people call a fist to the face.
Right. Well, it's just that, but there can be, like I said, there's that stillness. Like that's almost what I think I recognize most in 8s, which doesn't jive with the common idea of anger. And like my first reaction was literally that quote. I'm like, no, it's because I think along the lines of they're always angry, so you don't see the change. It's not like a 7 who's not really angry and then suddenly gets angry.
Yeah.
They seem to be much more like explosive about it.
Yeah.
Which makes
I
sense.
liken 7 anger, like from viewing Eric. I liken 7 anger to turning on a leaf blower. It's just like, oh, that's loud.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of fun, like him and Jacob both. I don't know if you did you see the big
I was
argument?
not privy to it. No.
Yeah, and so you've got, well, Eric's over there like blowing weed, and Jacob's kind of drunk, and he's got these like 2 7-8 3s, and they're just neither one of them are giving an inch or recognizing that they're not actually talking. They never met. Like the two planes of things they were talking on, like they were talking about the same issue, but they were both talking in different ways at different things, and it was just basically the equivalent of they were yelling at a wall at each other, and it went on for like 2 hours.
I'd like to liken
like,
it
oh,
to.
they're getting so emotional. I'm like, well, they're getting loud, but that doesn't. They're not really invested. Kind of like frustrated.
I'd like to liken it to 2 people yelling at each other through a concrete wall and increasingly getting mad at each other for mumbling.
I like that. That image. Really.
It's like neither of you will fucking go through the door so that you can avoid the concrete wall. You know what sucks half the times is that concrete wall is feelings. So your little FI, little I'm just gonna refer to it as the FI tumor. It's the FI growth. Ew, what is that thing hanging off of you? Yeah, that's my FI. Sorry. Um, it's like that thing's firmly sandwiched in that concrete wall.
Yeah, or the
It's like we'd rather keep the wall between us because we don't want to pass that threshold.
we don't want to touch. Like that's the door handle. You're like we don't want to touch that.
The door handle's just slimy. You're like, it's gross. I don't want to touch it.
I think sometimes it's the absolute lack of it too, because like what I see is and I saw this is they both already had been through the whole like chain of the particular contextual framing of the thing they were talking about, and so they were both already convinced, and so neither one of them was actually trying or had any hope of they weren't trying to find a solution together. They were just kind of like yelling each other's previously in their head thought out platforms or whatever. And that doesn't actually go anywhere with a couple of hard-headed ENTPs like that.
Right. I think it's useful to, but like I've sort of changed my stance on what I think of that sort of interaction. So I'm realizing more and more that like that mindset is more towards winning than it is discovering some sort of higher truth, because to really bring that energy, you have to believe you've already stumbled upon it.
Yeah. I think the kind of more loud arguments, that's usually the cause, is that at least one person has already been through this before and is really just like, look at this, stupid. I already know.
Yeah. And rather than feel like there's not enough room for that, and being like, oh, let's not do that in favor of this other thing, I'm like, oh, no, let's totally do that, but just realize that it's like, as for me, I don't have that same energy or gumption to argue like that. So I'd probably tap out pretty quick, but I'd still want to listen to people argue like that so that I can sort of on my own time be like, oh, well, this is what I think about that, or, something like this.
Right. I think it is more useful to the observers in a situation like that, because you see kind of you get to see the observers tend to be even have a little better hold on what's going on than the people involved in it sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's totally necessary too, which is kind of why I don't like it when people are like, all right, now let's calm down.
Yeah, I kind of hate that. I'm like it's fine.
And I've definitely done that a lot more in my life, prior to coming on here, which is why I like coming on here. I still don't watch those videos or listen to those extensively when like there's a lot of argument about stuff going on, like especially in like realms of politics. I just sort of bury my head in the sand because I'm like, I don't know what the fuck. Like people get so heated over it, which isn't a problem. But it's that these issues get so complex. I'm not sure exactly how to contribute, because I could be like, oh, I think this, like talk about like the Islam thing that was going on recently. I'd be like, oh, this is my opinion on Islam or things like that. And at my core, the thing that I'm thinking to myself is I really need more life experience. Like rather than getting more and more abstract about it, I'd rather gain experience of having interacted with people, and then based off of my experiential knowledge, being like, okay, this is what I think because this is what I've directly observed. And then beyond that, we can abstract, but just understand that I haven't directly observed that, so ultimately I don't know.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, I enjoy that sort of stuff because it so relates. You've got is most of the smaller issues can be abstracted back, but people don't actually like to do that. I've actually found it really refreshing to watch some of the ENTPs in here, because I'm like, oh, you kind of think about that the same way I did. I didn't have to even explain it to you.